Greetings, Earthlings. Thank you for joining us on this broadcast. Sorry I wasn't here last Saturday. I was going to do a live stream last Saturday, but I got a text from Zach Childs. Ask Zach, to those of you who know him from the internet, and he was in town last weekend. His daughter had a swim meet, and the window he had to meet was during our regularly scheduled broadcast. So I met him for a not very good latte but a very good 2 or 3 hour conversation and hang. Really nice guy. Very glad to finally meet him. But we met at a little coffee shop out in Germantown, which is kind of the uppity suburb of Memphis. You know, it's the hoity-toity zone. And so we met at this little coffee shop. In the middle of it, he brings out his gig bag and he opens it up and he hands me a Telecaster that was handmade for him by Brad Paisley. And while Zach doesn't sing his own praises on his channel very often, he gets on stage with Brad Paisley. He trades solos live with Brad Paisley. One of his best friends is J.D. Simo, who's also a monster player. And so, Zach just hands me the Telecaster in the middle of this coffee shop. And I'm like, okay, I'm in the middle of a coffee shop. Everyone around here is totally out of the guitar world. And I'm sitting with a monster player. And I'm like, don't fuck up, don't fuck up, don't fuck up. I didn't fuck up. I did a little playing just to test how the guitar was. Really nice neck, beautiful finish. Brad did a great job on it. And it was an honor. And after a suitable amount of time, I handed it back to him. Went away in the gig bag, and I passed the monster guitarist hands you a Telecaster in a coffee shop test, which I did not even know was a thing, but apparently it was. And just one of those things. How's everybody doing out there? Hope you're all having lovely weather. We are having incredible weather here in Memphis. It's in the low and mid 70s the past couple days, which is very nice after having a very, very hot, miserable summer. And I can breathe again. And it's not hot and it's not cold, and I'm just really enjoying the hell out of it. I guess I'll get to some of these questions here since I got 2 weeks worth saved up. Hey, Did Amnesia, can I recommend a legit line conditioner? I am very well, thank you. Hope you are as well. Most line conditioners are marketing. They might have a couple capacitors just to filter out some minor amounts of hash on the line. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, you can spend a whole lot of money for a Monster or a Furman, or you can just get a Trip Light Industrial that has a little bit of filtering built into it. And it's going to be really well built. The main thing is just to watch what line you put it on, which AC circuit of the house. You don't want to be on a circuit that has like a noisy refrigerator compressor on it, or a laser printer, which can put a lot of hash on the line, or a home security system, which can also put a lot of nasty spikes on things. So there's only so much you can expect from any line conditioner. If you get to an actual regulator, like, a band that's touring the world and going to be running on generator power is going to use, it's a $4,000 proposition. So most of the stuff marketed for individual use as a line conditioner is more promise than reality. It can't hurt, just don't overspend. And Did Amnesia bought a Variac gauge was off, very common. You need to calibrate the gauges on those things. I take the knob off, I turn the pot until 120 is 120, then I put the knob back on so the 120 line's in the right place. When it's set to 120 volts, it's set 138 volts to my deluxe reverb. Now it sounds like a transmission tower, loud while buzz that says broken. Probably not anything major, but it does happen. You need to calibrate your Variac, and you need a meter that can read the actual voltage, so you know that it does what it says on the tin. Hey, Christina. Christina has watched all episodes of Tube Amp Boot Camp. I understand them more or less. What amp builds or repairs am I not now qualified for? Am I an apprentice amp tech? Where do I go next? I don't know what Tube Amp Boot Camp is. I don't know whether that's good or bad information. I hope it's great information. And I don't know what that qualifies you to do or disqualifies you from doing. I don't, I can't speak to any of that. Are you an apprentice app tech? Well, are you working for under the direction and tutelage of a master, or, hanging out with journeyman app techs? I guess if you're watching my streams, you're hanging out with a journeyman app tech. I say start by working on your own gear, building things for yourself. And if you are successful, you can call yourself an apprentice app repair tech. And if you mess up, well, you're still at the very beginnings of your apprenticeship and you're not ready to hang your tile up for clients yet. That's all I can tell you. I don't mean any disrespect. I don't know what your skill level's at yet. But I think you have, based on this and other questions of yours in the past, you're on the right track, and I hope that comes across as encouraging. Hey, Dr. Paul, the Valve Wizard page on fusing the HT supply recommends fusing the pre-rectifier AC lines. Most apps seem to fuse the HT after the rectifier or the HT line to ground, center tap line to ground. Any thoughts? Well, I'm not a big fan of ever fusing the HT center tap to ground, because you can have, especially on any app that derives its bias from the HT supply, you can have a really high voltage HT supply with no current present that can just nuke a bias supply if all of a sudden your HT goes from 400 volts to 700 volts, even though there's no real current being drawn. I think Merlin's absolutely correct, and you're dealing with a much easier thing for a fuse to handle with AC than DC. You're going to be putting it in a place where you're less likely to have arcing from switches and stuff, or even arcing from fuse holder contacts, especially with modern clip-in tube fuse holders and stuff. Hey, Sash DC, working on a Metro Super Lead Turn 2203, and it has barely audible volume. All voltages throughout the circuit check out per spec. Output tubes heat properly. Bias circuit operates. Ideas? Well, what I do in that situation is predicated on that I know how loud similar amps of that similar wattage should be when testing, and I will measure voltages at each plate, and I should hear a fairly loud, predictable noise out of the speaker when I measure plate voltage. And I know what a deluxe reverb level should be and what a 45 watt level should be and how loud it should be with a 100 watt amp. So I'll start by measuring the phase inverter plates. Then I'll measure the stage before that. And if I get to a point where, hey, if I measure this stage, it's not as loud as I expect, that's the stage where there's a problem, or right after that stage there's a problem. So I work from the power amp back towards the input that way. And as far as troubleshooting remotely goes, that's the best I can give you. Triple check your voltage measurements just in case you missed anything. But usually there's going to be something causing that, and you will identify it. And you can go in there and inject a signal in different stages, grids and stuff. There are ways to inject signal and trace circuits that way. But it's usually faster and just as informative just to measure the plate voltage and listen to what the noise coming out of the speaker is. And you may, if you have master volumes and stuff, bear that in mind. But you'll find it. It could be a bad tube. You give a tube that heats up and even draws the correct voltages for cathode and plate with just at idle, but doesn't pass signal. So don't be afraid to triple check your tubes and triple check the voltage measurements. Let's see. Hey, Bill Lavanda had this Franza Axa in Munich. It was amazing. I'm glad you enjoyed it, man. I miss that so much. Nikki went to a thing last weekend here as an Oktoberfest, and they had Kaiserkrana. It wasn't Kaiserkrana. It was just a sad brat with some sad cheese on a sad bun. Not at all the real deal. There's a place in Chicago, apparently, I could import some of the real stuff from. I need to look into that, but the real deal is so damn good. Hey, Colin. Mistakenly warmed up a Victoria VIC 105 tube amp head for 15 minutes without a cab plugged in. I have since corrected it, and it works, but do you think I did some damage? Most likely no, Colin. Every Victoria I've had in has been wired like an old Fender, where the output jack shunts to ground if nothing's plugged in. So the danger is to have nothing connected at all and have zero load. When it grounds out, you have all the load in the world. Long term, if you were to do a 2-hour gig into that amp with amp levels all turned up with nothing plugged in, it might stress things out. But just for powering it up for 15 minutes without a load, it had a load, just the improper load. You're probably just fine. Hey, Leo in Colorado, thanks for that. Appreciate that. Victor, you got those Stormy Mondays in there. Cool. Let me know what you think. I hope they sound fantastic for you. Mark Spurgeon's going to North Carolina. Hope the weather there is like it is here. Should be comparable, which means glorious. Though up in North Carolina, depending where you're going, if you're going up in the mountains this time of year, the trees are going to start doing a beautiful color show for you. Let's see. Hello, Bambule. Thoughts on octal preamp tubes? Recently played a Dr. Z Octal 6 and enjoyed it. Hey, Matt Johnson. Played a few old Gibson amps with octal preamp tubes. What are my thoughts on them? My thoughts are that they can sound awesome, but there aren't a lot on the market left. And there's a reason the industry, by and large, went to Novels, the 12AX7 and similar Novel preamp tubes. Usually it's you get better. Everything that you want out of a tube was easier and more reliable to get from a Novel tube than an octal preamp tube. So there's a reason the industry is, by and large, went to Novel tubes. That doesn't mean anything's wrong with an old Gibson amp with octals, and I've certainly played some fantastic ones. Same for a lot of Ampegs. I'm not familiar with the Dr. Z Octal 6, but I hope it's fantastic. Mark, I'm sorry. Mark, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's terrible. Hope you and your family make it through the however long it takes you. I hope that you and whoever else in your immediate family can be together in this time. And I'm very sorry to hear that. It's hard to give things like that the proper weight in this format. I should just stop the chat, but that's. Hope you and yours are well, and let's all keep Mark and his family in our thoughts. Now let's talk about guitars again, because they're so damn important in the grand scheme of things, right? Hey, Dan D. He built a train wreck style amp for the first time. It has a lot of hiss. Yeah, they usually do. Turning down the presence to zero helps reduce some. I use metal film resistors for V100K plate resistors. What else? I hope you shielded the hell out of every grid connection. Make sure that everything is properly shielded. Make sure that when you test the cabinet, your testing stuff is not in the cabinet, so you're missing a plane of shielding. So get a sheet of aluminum or steel that you can put over the chassis, so when you're on your bench and you're testing it, the noise floor, you can fully shield that. That and shielded wires really helps a lot. And lead dress comes down to it, and preamp tube selection comes into it. Metal film resistors are a step in the right direction. They're not a cure-all. There are other factors for hiss, and a train wreck style circuit traditionally has an awful lot of gain, and you can be very, very hissy and very, very noisy, and they're a tricky thing to pull off well. So keep at it, don't give up, and remember that you are trying to build an amp that, when it works properly, is just this far from being an oscillating, noisy piece of shit. It's just right at that useful edge, and it's really hard to dial it to where that edge really is. It's not an easy build. She was 95, Mark says. Well, my great aunt is, I think, 99 now, and we know this is probably going to be the last winter with her. Sweet, sweet woman. Hey, Brad, thanks for joining us. Very early morning there in Emu Plains. Hey, Arthur, can I go into further detail on how cathode bypass caps help reject heater hum? Also, is a Marshall-style gain stage with the .68 cap more susceptible to heater hum? Well, yeah, if you do the RCA filter calculations with a Marshall-style thing where you got like a 2.7 bypass with a .68, and you've got a 100K plate, and you're using a 12AX7 with a nominal mu of 100. You're going to be looking at a high pass somewhere in the 200s, I believe. So that's well above the heater frequency. But usually we get away with it, partially because in like a 2203, 2204, or even a 2202, that stage, or your 1959, 1987, that stage is usually V1B. And for whatever reason, the B triode is often quieter or less susceptible than the A triode. I believe that's right. I might be misremembering that because it's hard to keep my left to right, upside down, upside right stuff straight. But it is going to be a little more susceptible, but at the same time, you're amplifying the low frequencies less, so you're not going to hear as much hum. It's a push me pull you to an extent. There is a reason people like DC heaters for Marshall preamps, or at least a DC elevation, though it's not always needed. You need to get all the ground loops out before you can hear when the heater changes make a huge benefit. As to going into further detail on how the caps help reject heater hum, that is really a chapter outside the bounds of this chat. I would suggest you go to valvewizard.co.uk, and he has a downloadable free PDF of one chapter of his book on preamps. And he covers that to a pretty good extent there with graphs and stuff. It is really difficult to get into with the time constraints per question that I need to have here. The difference between DC gain and AC gain in a triode tube stage. But Merlin's already got the stuff right down here. So I will defer that to him. And he has excellent books. It's very nice of him to make one of the chapters available for free there. Hey, Count Domingo the 7th. He's looking at picking up a pair of Two-Rock 12-inch speakers for a new twin reissue. I do not have any intel on the Two-Rock 12-inch speakers. I don't know who makes them. I have a lot of recommendations. I like the Alessandro, but you don't, though it is a very, very mid-range thing. I'm a huge fan of the ET65 and the ET90 and the Veteran 30 and the G12C and the G12CS, as most people who follow the channel know, and I've got a lot of videos showing that. Most of them are featuring a deluxe reverb because there are more players using deluxe reverbs than twin reverbs, but I've got some twins on there with some of those speakers as well up on the channel. Those are really good choices for a twin. But, someone else may be looking for that JBL sound, and I hope they have a very strong lower back if they do. Hey, Bambio, how would I utilize or mod a PA135? Turn it to another Fender schematic or use it as is? I wouldn't mess with it. There are so many amps that are closer to what you already want them to be than that. I don't think everything needs to be converted. I think if you want a super reverb, it's better to buy a super reverb than to turn something else into kind of sorta. Now, I say that. I'll modify the normal channel of a deluxe reverb to be more like a super reverb. But that's changing one capacitor. That's not doing a whole bunch of work. Some amps aren't that great for modern use, and the PA 135 is, someone's going to disagree with me. Someone's going to love that thing, but that and some of the mega clean Bassmans and Marshall PAs and stuff, they is what they is. But with any of those PA amps from the late 60s and 70s, usually the issue is they have the mixing. They'll have like 4 channels being mixed together, and every time you mix 2 channels together, you get a huge drop in gain. So by the time you have 4 channels, nothing has any gain. So what you need to do is just at the basis is go to the mixer and disconnect 2 or 3 of the possible inputs and just have one input. And all of a sudden that input has gain and it becomes a guitar amp. So if you must play around with it, that's the thing to look at first. Isn't Uncle Doug's two-band boot camp my videos? No, that's Uncle Doug. I've been told that I sound like him, and I've watched a few of his videos. I don't think I sound like him. I've also been told I sound like Neil Peart, that I don't hear. Though we have similar rhythms to some of the things we say, though he was much better at rhythms in general. I get dude from Breaking Bad, which I don't hear at all. Mike Ehrmantraut, or is that the character's name? Anyway, I get that a lot. I don't hear that. And occasionally I get Harrison Ford, to which I can only say, I know. Hey, see, fantastic. I've been shopping for a Princeton style amp. I came across Headstrong amps. Do I have any experience with them or any opinions on those amps? Well, I was telling Zach last week. Zach's got some Headstrongs. He loves them. He's got a little King he loves. And his buddy J.D. Simo loves those things. And I said, well, I'd like to check one out if you want to get the owner of Headstrong in touch with me. I'd love to have a positive opinion of them. I can say that a lot of players really like them. And I can say that I've not heard any horror stories. I've seen a photo of the inside of one, and it had a bus wire across the back of the pots, which I fundamentally disagree with. And there's some other things in there that I thought, could be better. But that was one photo of one amp, and I don't know if maybe it was a very early one, and that they've since made everything better. So I'm hoping that they're great. A lot of players really like them. But at the same time, I don't know if the app's being sent to J.D. Simo or Zach Childs might be at a certain level of care not given to those shipped out to dealers or whatever. I don't know. I hope that they're fantastic. I've heard good things about them, but I have no direct experience with them or of them. Thank you, Flash 84. Sounds like a movie I would get in trouble for watching on Cinemax back in the day. What are my thoughts on diesel amps? Build quality, good, bad, or so-so? Thinking about a VH4. I think they're kind of crappy. I'm sorry. I don't think that they're built very well. The one that I got a call from a band, Y&T, I think. They were one of those bands from the hair bands from the 80s. They were playing in town, and emergency call, come to the venue. Their amp went down, and it was a diesel. It had like three or four channels with the diagonal knobs, and it looked great, but the inside had just charred because the way it was laid out. It was built so poorly, and it was burnt. And I had to say, I am really sorry. I could fix this. It would cost more to fix it. It would cost more to fix this than to buy 2 other amps. Here's my buddy Eric Martin's number. He's got a music store in town. He'll probably rent you an amp to get you through the gig, which is all I could do. But it was really poorly built, and it was one of their high-end, expensive models. And I've heard from some other techs similar horror stories. So I would avoid diesel. I don't know what to steer you towards in that higher gain world specifically, though I would look at some of the Friedman and Suhr higher gain models. And I think Metropolis has got some stuff. Bogner, some of their models are fantastic. Some of them aren't. I think maybe Uberschall might make you very happy. And also Head First, my buddy Head First amps. I always forget that he's got distribution in America now. Um, so look into Head First amps. So the Alto might make you extremely happy. But I would think that the VH4 and similar would cost you a lot of money and initially make you very happy, and then they might well blow up and catch on fire, then burn down, fall over, and sink into the swamp. So can't really recommend. Van Schenk Guitars just blew an op amp in his Spark 40. Well, depends on if it's surface mount. I think anything made with non-surface mount op amps should be socketed. This might be your chance to install a socket. But the nice thing is if it's SMD, just get some chip quick. Hopefully it'll be pretty easy. Hopefully it's just an op amp. You need to see if it was an op amp that blew or something else that went out and took out the op amp. That's always the trick. Hopefully you can get a schematic Sparks. I'm not sure if they even offer that. Thanks again, man. You don't have to give me multiple super chats. I'll take them and I'll spend them quite happily, and I appreciate you. But you don't have to. What are my thoughts on the Dookie Bradshaw mod? Does it do anything significantly better than any other mod that adds gain? Are there any amps on the market that use it? Can the BE100 DLX nail that tone? I don't know what the Bradshaw mod is. I know what the Dookie mod is. John Suhr, who's a friend of mine, did the Dookie mod. And he's increasing the amount of low end and decreasing some high end emphasis to get a fuller, fatter sound, which is pretty simple to do on a 2204, 2203. It's a very good sound. I like it a lot. It makes it sound a little more like an earlier Marshall with just a little more gain applied. The Bradshaw mod, there have been so many amps associated with clients of Bob Bradshaw that I don't know what the Bradshaw mod is. Are there? I think if you were to, I think the Brown Eye 100 doesn't do that, but it can be made to do kind of similar things. I think you'd probably be better off with the Friedman JJ. The Jerry Cantrell model to get a little bit closer to that. But talk to Dave Friedman. He knows exactly what the Dookie mod is. And Suhr might have some option for the 68 that does a similar thing. Or maybe they'll say, no, it's not the 68. It's this other model we make. This switch does that. I don't know because I don't keep up with every amp out there. I keep up with good companies, though. And, you have to remember that the Dookie mod was also chosen in conjunction with the room in that studio, with that engineer, his choice of mics, the acoustic treatment in that studio, how many mics were being used at once, where the faders were at, what the EQ was like, what the compression was like, what the limiting was like, and that was before we're even getting to what Bob Clearmountain or someone at mastering did. So there's what the amp sounds like, and there's what the amp sounds like on one record, and it's probably different from song to song. Especially, I think that the Green Day thing had very layered guitars. You might be hearing 60% Dookie mod and 20% PV Classic 20, and who knows. Any of the higher gain amps that also cross over into more vintage gain levels that Suhr and Friedman offer would make you happy and could be used by Billy Joe Armstrong on a session with a great engineer sculpting the sound towards its role in the track, because that's different than what the amp sounds like by itself. Let's see. Hey, sent to me. Split the cathodes on V1 on the M2204 50 watt 22 microfarad 50 volt electrolytic and 820 R. Okay, yeah. 2.7K, not 7.2K, but yeah, that's it. But you don't need to. The stock ground on the board is fine. You already have the locations on the board for the cathodes, and they're just going to go. You'd want it to go to the input ground connection on a stock amp. It's going to be a bus wire, but you've seen me make that change. But the first and second stage in a 2203, 2204 can be grounded together. Hey, Victor, is torrefied neck more stable than quarter sawn? I don't know. I think it's going to depend. What was the grain pattern of the torrefied neck, and how well aged and dried was the quarter sawn? I imagine they're fairly comparable if you're looking at quality to quality. Maybe a torrefied / roasted quarter sawn might be the most stable of maple options, but I think there's a point beyond which you get diminishing returns. I've got quarter sawn on my Eric Johnson. I've got flat sawn on the K-line, and it's great. And it's roasted flat sawn. It's great. And I've got what is this? This is almost quarter sawn on this Musicraft neck, but it's an inch thick. This is the most stable neck I have, just because nothing's going to move this. So there are other variables besides just the wood. Any thoughts on the Fender Bassman 10? Yeah, they're good, but not great amps, and they're very, very clean, and they are reasonably priced because they're handicapped in stock form. They're fine. It's not like there's anything to watch out for. Just know what it is. It's a small, clean amp. It won't do anything inherently interesting by itself. Doesn't have a lot of character, which sounds boring to some people, and other people are like, man, that'd be perfect for all my pedals, and maybe they'll get the world's best sound using that. I would not seek one out myself. Hey, Rob. Rob's been told that scratchiness in volume controls can sometimes be attributed to leaky coupling caps. Is this true? Yeah. A leaky coupling cap, the thing that it's leaking is DC. And DC on a pot, because you're varying the resistance, you get noise. That's one common cause of noise on a volume pot. The other one can be just a dirty pot, which I showed in the last video I put up on the Blues DeVille, DeVille. And the other issue can be you have voltage leaking in the preamp tube. So the grid itself has got some DC on it, and it's tied to a pot. Whatever, if the wiper of the pot feeds the input of a tube, the grid, if there's any buildup of voltage there because it's a bad tube, or you've got a bad cathode resistor or something and it's not biasing correctly, that can also put DC on a pot. So basically you can say, here's the coupling cap before the pot. Make sure it's not leaking DC, because you don't want to have DC on the pot side of that coupling cap. And then here's the pot. It could be dirty. And then the wiper of the pot goes off to this other tube. Make sure there's no DC there. You could have 0 DC present after this cap, but DC coming from the grid. If the pot's on 10, you're going to measure voltage after that cap and think, oh, I've got a bad cap. But really, it's because the pot's on 10, so you have voltage here that's actually coming from pin 2 of the next tube. So what you want to do in that scenario to say, where is that voltage coming from, is one of two things. You can either put the pot halfway, or put the pot, a quarter of the way up, and say, all right, I got 2 volts on the wiper, but only have 250 millivolts after the cap. That means the voltage is coming from the grid. It's not coming from the cap, just a little bit is bleeding through the pot to the cap. Or you can lift the grid wire of the tube, or you can pull the tube, which doesn't always work in case you have a bad socket that's relatively rare. So pull the tube in that situation, all your voltage may disappear, in which case there's nothing leaking from that cap. It's all coming from a bad tube or a tube which is misbiasing. Hopefully that helps. If you watched that video I put up last week on the, or was it just earlier this week? I don't remember, on the Blues DeVille, you'll notice that sometimes I'm moving that pot a lot to get the scratchiness out. Because I was trying to show owners what they can do without buying a $25, $30 thing of fader lube that they'll use once a year, if that. It's faster with the solvent, but it's always good to avoid the solvent if you can. If I just turn that thing 10 times and the noise goes away, it's just a fine layer of dust that was needed to be worked out. You can also get in there with compressed air, which helps. Guten Tag, Jan. Finished planning a VibroChamp build. Use my insightful videos. Thank you. Cathode resistor on drift might be an issue. Grand stacked output transformer, 10-inch speaker, V1 5751. I'm not sure what you mean by a cathode resistor drift on it. If you're building a new VibroChamp, if you're building it, I'm not sure why you'd have drifting resistors. I'm not sure what your question is. I'd like to know what your question is. I don't want to pass you by, but I'm not sure what you're asking me, or how you could have a drifting resistor in a new build. Hey, Flesh again. Do the Marshall 2203X 800 reissues live up to the hype? I've heard the build quality has gone down. The build quality has definitely gone down, especially, well, depends. They've got like the smaller versions of all these things now with the little green square plastic pots. I find those things not very reliable. Though if you, as Brad just mentioned, if you do have one, do buy some compressed air, because about every 3 months you need to open that thing up and use compressed air on those little green chiclet pots, because they're notorious for tin whiskers. The version with full-size pots is actually a pretty good amp. The issue with that is the heater supply. Brad, can you find your video on the heater fix for Marshall reissue? It applies to the 87, the 59, the 2203, and the 2204 reissues, where they did a really dumb thing using an powered blue trim pot for the whole heater supply. And the fix is just to bypass that trim pot with 200 ohm half-watt resistors. So it's really a $1 fix total, and very easy to do. And I've shown that in videos, and Brad here at Brad's Guitar Garage has shown that in videos. But he has the ability to find the video and put a link up for you, which I don't have at the moment. But that's the main issue with the reissue, the ones which have full-size pots. Other than that, and sometimes the transformers tend to die. They're kind of crapping out, cheaping out on the transformers, which does not seem to be reflected in the price of the amp. So in general, I would suggest you buy one used rather than new, because the used ones are going to be just as reliable or just as unreliable as the new ones, but you're not paying extra for the privilege of finding out that you need to replace a power transformer a year later. And it's not the end of the world if you do. And almost any current production Hebor power or output transformer is going to be much higher quality than what's coming from the factory. And Brad just posted the link to his video showing how to fix the heater issue in all of the reissue Plexi and JCM 800s that Marshall's put out. By which I mean the 2203, 2204, 1987, 1959 rather, 1987, and JTM 45. Hey, A-Golf Twitler. I love the usernames. He has a Blues DeVille and it has the standard crap volume and gain issues with low settings. I currently use a cheap volume pedal in the effects loop. Is there a mod I would suggest to fix? Well, the best way to do it is to do it non-invasively. Put a 12AY7 in V1 and maybe a 5751 in V2. And if you want an even cleaner range, since the amp is mostly used for clean, you won't be giving up much, if any, output level. You'll just be getting a nicer, cleaner response and a more predictable behavior of the volume pot. Put a 12AT7 in V3, and you will have reduced the total gain of the amp a lot, making 2 or 3 on the volume pot behave the way you want. It'll still be potentially a very loud, very clean amp when you want it to be, but then you don't have to nuke the output level from Orbit with an effects level hack, and you can use the effects level much more predictably. And that does not involve any permanent modification of the amp. You can always put it back with putting 3 12X7s back where they used to be. I have no experience with Engel amps myself. They're primarily a European phenomena. I've heard mixed things from my European tech friends. Many of them don't think they're very good. Some people like them. See if Brad here has any experience with them, but I don't have any experience. So my opinion does not really matter, other than I have my doubts. Hey, Zachary Zagar there in Albuquerque. Hey, Chango Mallow. Fender has released a reissue of the Brownface Super. What are the odds it has all the same badge and engineering of the other issues? I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. I will say that on the 68 custom Pro Reverb that they have out, they have fixed an awful lot of the issues that have always plagued the 65 and 68 reissues of the other amps. Now, it's interesting that the 68 custom reissue Pro Reverb is not a Pro Reverb. It is a 40-watt version of the circuit with a very different implementation of how the reverb and tremolo works, and it's a nice sounding little amp. It's got more radial caps. It's not a copy of the circa 1994 PCB layout that all the other reissues use. So I'm hoping that they took this opportunity to up their game on the Brownface Super. That said, specifically when it comes to the 65 reissue series, while they're not the best in some ways, the issues are pretty easy to solve. You change out the crappy axials for higher quality axials on the electrolytics. You move the screen grids and the heater stuff, the stuff that gets hot off the PCB. It's a very good sounding, reliable amp at that point. And hopefully they will have done similar things in the Brownface Super reissue. I've not seen one yet, so I could be wrong. It could be awful. I hope it's not. I hope it's not. I don't want Fender to make bad things. I don't want to have to tell people that Marshalls are to be avoided now. I love being able to say the Voxes, at least the custom series, are really damn good for the money. I'd love to be able to say, hey man, just go get a reissue Fender Twin. It's still a Fender Twin. I can't always recommend it. Not at new prices. Anthony Tyson's working on a 70s Showman and Super Reverb. Nice. Yeah. If that's the name of it. Merlin's only got one book on preamps and one book on power amps, as far as I know. So that'd be the preamp one. I know I have not ordered one. I read over someone's shoulder, so to speak, some excerpts. And everything I read, I agreed with wholeheartedly. But I have not had the time to buy a book just to read it and say, yep. But people I know who have all say, yep. And, I've done my time with some other books, some of which are yep, and some books out there are nope. But I'm famously a curmudgeon. and I'm too old to learn new ways of doing things. No, really, I'm always learning. I'm always learning. Hey Charlie, I'm glad you like those amps. Those are pretty good amps for the price, especially that AC15 and the DSL40. C and CR do cover an awful lot of good ground for the average gigging player at a pretty reasonable price. Do I have any experience to comment on the build quality of the JC40 or 120? Yeah, avoid them. There is no build quality with Roland jazz choruses. They were a really great idea in 1978, and they've been built like 30 different ways. They're Boss pedals in amp form with bizarre cost-cutting measures depending on the year of production. Really terrible sounding speakers, weird vibrato. I'm sorry, weird chorus that's only on one speaker. Makes it sound, it sounds great to you, but through a mono PA, you're going to have issues. And they've got a really high noise floor. They're really way noisier than they need to be. And for half the price or less, you can get a Blues Cube or a Katana 100 Artist or something. It's going to get that sound and like 38 others at least as well, if not much better. So I'm not a huge fan of the JC120 or 40, and I've owned the JC120, and I've done my time with the JC120. And back when it was the only option, it was not a bad option. Just there's so many better options today for solid state / modeling amps. Who do I think makes modern quality high gain amps? Budget's no issue. EVH PV Diesel Engel. Well, apparently Brad likes the Engel Fireball, so I'll take Brad's opinion on the Engel. I've not, like I said, I don't have any experience with the Engel. The EVHs are junk. The PVs are pretty much junk. Not as junky as the 5150s made by Fender, and not the EVH branded ones. And they're not as junky as the Mesas, but the PVs aren't great. I think the PVs, if you can get like a 5150 for $800, maybe have someone move the heater wires so it doesn't burn up the ribbon cables, and expect to replace the J174s in the muting circuit, because those fail because it's a day that ends in Y. But other than that, they're okay. I would suggest you look into Head First, Suhr, Friedman, and Soldano. Those are the ones I'd go to if I were in that market. And I think Metropolis has got some bangers as well. Now, everyone's idea of a perfect high gain sound is very different, so I can't tell you which of them or which model from which manufacturer, but those are the guys I would trust. Is the V1A grid shielding for the grid wire okay to attach to the grounding lug at the input jacks? Yeah, that's where I attach it. Yeah, sent to me. I saw your text this morning. I'll call you. I think sent to me's in town, and he's building a 2203 or 2204. I don't remember which, from Mojo Dome Kit. He's got some hum issues, and I don't have time to do back and forth texts and stuff, because talking about amp issues can be really difficult. Here I am talking about amp issues to everyone, but here I'm kind of doing broad sweeping terms. But I will make time. Let's talk, and you can bring that over, because I can probably solve your problem in 10 to 15 minutes on my bench. And if I open up and say, hey, here's what's going on, here's why you have a problem, and here's the fix, take this home and go fix it, that saves me a lot of time, and you learn a lot more in the process. So I think that's what we need to do. I'll get in touch with you this afternoon. Actually, this afternoon I'm gonna be pretty busy. Tomorrow I'll get in touch with you, and we'll just nip that in the bud, Andy. Just nip that in the bud. Hey, T777 just got a Princeton reissue with a 12-inch for $750. That's a really good deal. It costs a lot less than Headstrong. Headstrong seems to be much better built, but that said, the 65 reissue, once you deal with the things that get hot, like I've shown in the videos, it's not hard to do. That's a good sounding amp. and especially if you have a good sounding speaker. I'm a bigger fan of the 10 inch than the 12 inch in a Princeton, but there's nothing wrong with a 12 inch. But Bill's glad to be back in his air conditioning. Well, I'll tell you what, I am so glad not to need air conditioning right now, because, it is not a creature comfort here in Memphis in the summer. It is a matter of survival, and it is glorious to have it off. Hog Pig Nose 20, trouble with batteries charging? I don't know anything about a Hog Pig Nose 20 and charging batteries. I have not played around with a Pig Nose since 1987 or so, when I saw Ralph Macchio using one in Crossroads, and I thought, oh, that's how to get that sound. And I tried one. For some reason, plugging a guitar into a real Pig Nose does not sound like a studio recording of Ry Cooder, probably playing through an Oahu or something, even though you see Ralph Macchio with a Pig Nose on his belt. Skip Brad, sorry. Best high gain amps are Friedman, Headfirst, Bogner. Diesel VH4 amps are hilariously bad. They build a PCB, then float all the components above it and don't use it at all. Yeah. Brad knows whereof he speaks. My Friedman JEL pops on, but plays amazingly well. I don't, but the amp is great. Contact Dave. That's not normal behavior for that model. It might have a faulty switch. It happens. The measure of a company is everything they make perfect for all time. But when something inevitably goes wrong, what then? And if you got a bad switch, Dave will hook you up, I'm pretty sure. Or Dave will know that model really well and say, oh yeah, that happens from time to time, and it's this diode or something. Give him a shot. He does excellent customer support. Thinking of trying Weber Blue Dogs or Celestion Blue, my new Vox AC30C2. What power ratings on the Webers work well with the Vox? Well, you can use the 15 watt, which are also fairly conservatively rated, just like the Celestion's really more like a 20 watt speaker, 22 watt speaker. Don't take that as gospel, because there's always a chance they'll die. But what I have found is that the 30 watt Weber Blue Dog sounds more like an older, well played in Celestion Blue, whereas the 15 watt Blue Dog sounds like a brand new Weber 15 sounds like a brand new Celestion 15, which can be a little bit harsh. But if you get the 30, not only do you have a little extra padding as far as killing the speaker, but it sounds a little warmer, a little more broken in. To me, and I've done direct comparisons, it sounds more like an older Blue Celestion 15. And that's something I've always enjoyed about the Webers, is you can increase the wattage a little bit and get kind of a softer high. It's not dark, it's just a little, that's where we get into terms like silky versus harsh. You know it when you hear it. It's like porn. You know it when you hear it. Well, I guess just porn for the blind. No, hey man, thank you very much. I'll hook you up. We'll get that nut cracked. Speaking of porn for the blind. Hey again, Christina. PV 6.5 inch speakers blown. Amp says 10 watts, 9 volt RMS 8 ohm load for each channel. Each speaker has its own set of wires from chassis. Speakers are not wired together. What specs for speakers needed? You need two 6.5 inch speakers rated for, I always look for 15 to 20 watt speakers at 8 ohms. I don't know which PV this is, but I bet if you were to Google speakers for PV, whatever the model is, someone else has already solved this for you. 9 volt RMS is the odd thing there. Most people don't list a voltage RMS on a speaker. But maybe Brad knows more than I do about that. That's not a measurement I encounter very often. I don't know which PV you're talking about. Sorry. I don't have any experience with the Laney VC30 as far as I know. Situation vacant. I've had a few Laneys in, and I might have had a VC30 in, but I don't recall if it was called a VC30. It might have been LC30. I might be misremembering that because my initials. I always thought that it was the Laneys that I've had in, the current production, recent production Laneys, are good amps, but nothing that I'd seek out. So if I see them, I don't think, oh, that's to be avoided. I'm like, oh, that's okay. I don't know. It's just like a Toyota Corolla, which is faint praise to some and utter high praise to others. I think it's a good, fairly reliable, unremarkably built, unremarkable sounding option for a lot of people. And if you have one and you love one, then I'm obviously wrong and it's the best amp ever. But I've never been excited about them. Meanwhile, someone is on their 400,000th mile on a Toyota Corolla. Same kind of deal with that approach. I don't think the Laney's is as reliable as that. But, there's nothing, I don't see anything wrong with them. I don't like how some of the heater connectors are done, but I've not seen one that was a problem. So, hey, Jimmy Pete, looking at the Bad Cat Cub 3 player series, PCB build, scratchy K Master Pot, volume surge like tremolo. Ideas what may be the problem, controls, PCB, or chassis mount, thoughts on the amp itself. I have no experience with a Bad Cat Club 3. Maybe Brad does. I've not historically been a fan of Bad Cats. I've been told that they've got a new engineer who's doing fantastic things. I don't know whether that new fantastic things, which I've not seen myself. I don't know whether that includes your Cub 3. I would say with any typically less expensive or less expensively made PCB amp, one of the first things to look at for across the board is that many times they make their grounds, so the entire operation of the circuit depends on the PCB being attached to the metal standoff, which ties the ground on the trace on the board to the chassis. So what I recommend is that with the amp unplugged from the wall and discharged if you can. And the way to discharge it is have the amp on, making sound, plug a guitar in, do that, turn the power off or unplug it from the wall while the amp's still on, and keep doing that until you don't hear any sound. That's going to drain most of the voltage out of the caps. Then back off each screw that's holding the PCB down. If you can, get in there with a little squirt of isopropyl, wait 20 minutes, or you can use deoxit. Wait 20 minutes, then retighten each screw and make sure that all the screws are really nice and tight, and then power it on. And many times that fixes problems with little PCB amps because all the grounds are suddenly good again. And Brad says that the VC30s are built like Hot Rod Blues Deluxe amps and have similar issues. So take away what I said about the Laney possibly being Corolla-like. Like I said, I didn't remember if I had a VC30. So apparently you should avoid the Laney VC30. Sorry. Maybe the Lionheart is the one that I had in that was more bland but non-objectionable. It's hard to remember strings of letters and numbers, at least it is for me. We are at the top of the hour. We're going to take our first 7-minute intermission. And maybe I'll have some better ideas on the next amp that's questioned about. I have better answers for the amps that I know than the amps I've only heard of or am hearing of for the first time. It's funny how that works. Anyway, see you guys in 7 minutes. Welcome back. Good to see you here, Yeetzy. Goody Guitars made homemade sausage biscuits this morning for him and his son. They are so good. I am hungry. I shouldn't be. I am. Nikki and I split a ham and cheese croissant for breakfast, thinking that would be enough, and I'm wishing I had the other half for myself, because I'm a selfish bastard. A new bakery has opened up in town in Memphis. Well, they've been open for a while. We discovered them fairly recently, and they have some good stuff. So I do have 2 ginger molasses cookies for later, but I had about 3/4 of, because Nikki eats like a bird. Figuratively, birds actually eat multiple times their own way today, which, sorry, geek, but it wasn't enough. I need more. What the fuck is a sausage biscuit? I'll let Good Guitars tell you. It's not a sausage roll. How much does it cost to build a Princeton Reverb? They seem overpriced. Well, if I were to build you a Princeton Reverb the way Fender built you a Princeton Reverb, you're looking about $2,500 if I was feeling generous. Now, if I had employees and I had have insurance for all the employees, and I had to have a building large enough for all that, and I needed to set up international distribution, and I needed to have cardboard boxes with foam inserts made to ship the amp to you, the cost goes up. And, especially if I'm only making X number a year. Leo was selling them quite expensively if you adjust for inflation. Look at what one costs in 64 and then do the inflation adjustment calculations. Princeton Reverb's like a $2,500 to $2,700 amp. A deluxe Reverb's almost $3,000, and a twin Reverb's $4,500, $5,000 typically. People used to make more money than they do now. That's what we don't like to talk about or think about too much. What do I think is the minimum size dimensions of a 1x12 cab that you need in order for it to start sounding good? I'd want maybe a minimum 11-inch deep, probably 12-inch deep, by 18 by 20 maybe. That'd probably be a pretty good set of dimensions. I'd want it to be deeper than a deluxe reverb. Maybe just a deeper deluxe reverb without the chassis part. So not too big, but enough low end to capability for it to really speak. What should I search for to buy a stout ground bus wire that some builders use? Some seems very straight and hard. Hard to imagine it comes from a spool. Well, there are tricks to it. You can buy a tool that'll straighten it. You can buy a tool that'll bend it however you want, kind of like fret wire. I've got 2 steel blocks that I pull the wire through and it straightens it out. And there's some other tricks where you get a length of it and pliers at each end and you twist it until it straightens. It kind of pops out all the kinks out. The other trick that I often use, if I need to, I don't do a ground bus wire the way people do across the back of a pot or something. Very rarely will I use, if I do a ground bus wire, I do it from a ground lug floating in the air behind all the pots, and I'll run wires from the pots to it. I don't do it on the back of the pots. But one of the tricks, and I've shown this in some videos, is instead of trying to get like a 12 or 14 gauge wire, which is a very thick wire, which is very hard to get to accept solder, I'll do 2 18 or 2 20 gauge wires, and I'll twist them together, and I'll make a much thicker wire, but it's all pre-tinned, and it's easy to solder to. It gives you the same conductivity as a single thick piece, but the big ones are, they tend to tarnish, and it's real hard to get them to accept solder, and they're just a pain in the butt. But I try to avoid bus wires whenever possible myself. Any thoughts on Fromel mod kits for Hot Rod Deluxe? Yeah, it's just making a bad situation worse. They don't do anything to fix the amp's problems. They don't give you any real benefit, and they're all the wrong parts because you have a hole in the PCB, which is of a fixed diameter, and then he sells you an orange drop, 716p or 715p, where the diameter of the lead is much too large to go in that hole. So you jam it through and it just destroys the trace in the pad and doesn't sound any different than a Panasonic or back in the day Zycon little film cap that would have fit on the PCB just fine. Meanwhile, the problems that the amp actually has are not addressed. And there's so many bad things I've seen, like people putting 100 microfarad filter caps in a Blues Junior or something, and like that output transformer can't support the potential low-end benefit you potentially could get from that much capacitance. But all of a sudden your B plus is very, very different. And the EL84s aren't necessarily happy with a much higher B plus as a result of a much larger filter capacitor. Avoid the Fromel stuff. It's an easy way for someone to make money because you sell someone, $6 worth of parts for $35. You can make a nice profit, but you aren't doing an actual service to anyone. Hey, Taylor Nutt. Is it Nut? Yeah, sorry. My eyes swim at this distance, and the M's and the N's kind of go together. I need to get new glasses. Just picked up a cosmetically mint 79 Princeton Reverb from its owner. How does the tremolo on the Princeton Reverb compare to a VibroChamp? Alnico speaker recommendations for the Princeton? Well, they both are using a similar circuit to an extent. The VibroChamp is varying. I think the VibroChamp is varying the bias of a preamp stage depending on the model. The Princeton is varying the bias at the output stage, and I prefer the Princeton to the VibroChamp, but I like the VibroChamp too. I'm pretty sure the VibroChamp is just doing the varying the bias of the preamp stage. Alnico speaker recommendations for the Princeton. Well, I'm not a huge fan of putting an Alnico speaker in a 79 Princeton. If you must, I'm not sure if it fits, but I think it would fit. The little Alnico 10 that Celestion has would be a good choice, and Weber and WGS both have their versions of that. I wouldn't put like a P10R or other Chicago Jensen style Alnico in a Princeton. I don't think it would have any sparkle, and that amp's not going to be able to push that speaker to get any of the interesting mid-range stuff that can happen with those speakers. So I would go more towards the British end of the Alnico spectrum if you must have one. But I like a ceramic in a Princeton. I think it sounds right. And you just got a roasted sugar pine Warmoth. Nice. Hope you enjoy it. Sounds tastier than it should, doesn't it? Do I think an early 70s Music Master bass amp for guitar is a good buy, price-wise, tone-wise? I don't know hey Colin, I don't know what the price that you would pay for that is. The Music Master bass amp is kind of like the Bassman 10. Someone's gonna love it. I find it kind of characterless and bland and not that interesting. But it's not bad. It's not bad. It's just not great. It is beige. It is the beige of the amp world, and some people really like it, and some people insist that no, it's not beige, it's taupe. I thought taupe was more purpley, but anyway. Which amps, like Marshall, should never be played without a speaker load? What does that damage sound like? Hey, well, I can't tell you a categorical list of companies because some companies do their output jacks one way on their Fender models and a different way on their Vox or Marshall style models. I can tell you don't ever want to do it on a Vox or Marshall, but I don't know about all the other companies out there. And some companies, they don't shun it to ground, but they'll put like a 330, 470 ohm, 10 or 20 watt resistor in parallel just to give some kind of load, some kind of protection to the speakers. That's more in case someone were to disconnect the speaker by accident while playing, or a speaker were to die, and the premise is just to protect the output tubes and output transformer long enough for the amp to be powered off or the cabinet to be reattached. It's not meant to be a dummy load. As to what does the damage sound like, it depends. Did it may kill your output tubes, in which case it sounds like nothing. It could damage your output transformer. It could, in theory, draw so much current that it damages something in the bias supply, in which case you could have a lot of ongoing problems. But I can't tell you. Sometimes it just kills a tube or makes a tube not last as long as it otherwise would have, though that one's really hard to know. Hey, Jeff McElwain. I'm going to go ahead and answer Jeff's question, though it's late in the chat, or it's recent in the chat, just because he doesn't always have time to hang out here like the rest of his goons. What are my thoughts in the Classic Lead 80 reissue? And hello. I don't have any thoughts on the Classic Lead 80 reissue because I've not tried it. So there's my opinion. That's why I answered the question early. So you didn't wait for me to say, oh, I don't know. But I have a feeling that if you were to call Celestion and say, hey, I'm Jeff fucking McElwain, send me one of those fuckers, they'd send you one of those fuckers, and you can say, well, that's terrible, I won't use that again. Or you'll say, that's great, I'll use it. Because that's how you should start all your conversations. I'm Jeff fucking McElwain. If my name was Jeff fucking McElwain, that's how I'd introduce myself. Let's see, where were we? If I had an experience, I'd share it with you. You get one, you let me know what, and then I'll think whatever you tell me to think. That'd be a good trade-off. Yeah. Hey man, a 79 Princeton Reverb. There are gonna be predictable things the amp needs, but there's no reason that amp can't go another 60 years. And they're really it's got good bones. Main fuse on Mojotone Vibroverb popped when taken out of standby. I might have biased low off that Variac. Curious as to first steps. Well, first of all, you don't need to use standby on a Vibroverb. Well, wait, that one's got solid state. You might want to. Second of all, I don't know how it's built. It's a Mojotone build. I don't know who built it. I don't know if you built it. I don't know if things were done correctly or not. I can't tell you. Assuming a properly built amp, it should not blow when taken out of standby, unless you have a faulty tube. Now, you may have a faulty tube as a result of giving 138 volts mains. You might have, one of the tubes might have said, I can't handle this, man, and gone south, in which case you got a bad fuse because you have a bad tube. So power the amp on without output tubes and see if the fuse stays good. And hopefully you've got a current limiter, or at least a light bulb limiter like I show in my videos. That'll save you from buying, feeding tons of fuses to an amp. Better to not blow the fuse and have the light bulb go bright, because the light bulb can handle it. Fuse, not so much. Yeah, I should have shown the compressed air in that video, and I should have shown a few other troubleshooting steps in that video. It didn't occur to me until after I'd edited and uploaded it and I was done with it. I didn't want to think about it anymore. I ain't perfect yet. I'm working on it. Hey, on VibroChamp question clarification, I'm afraid it'll take some time to find the correct cathode resistor for the VibroChamp since the circuit cooks those things under modern wall voltages. Well, stock is a 470. I usually find a 680 to 820 does the trick. And the nice thing is there's not a lot, it doesn't take a lot of current. So you don't need to use 5-watt cements. They only come in certain values. 2 or 3 watt metal oxide or metal films are absolutely fine. You don't need to spend even for wire wounds for that. So try a 680, 720, and 820, and one of those will get you where you need to be most likely. And you're better to sneak up on it from the too cold side. So maybe start with the 820, and if you need to warm up a little bit, try the 720. If you need to warm up a little bit, try the 680. And you can just tack solder them in place temporarily while you don't have to do a proper install for this. Or if you feel up to, you can just alligator clip them in place just for test purposes, making sure nothing touches the chassis or anything that doesn't need to have any voltage on it. It's not a big deal. Don't overthink it. Don't worry about it. But you don't need to get a whole bunch of $3 resistors, partially because the number of resistances that a 5 watts or 10 watt ceramic comes in are fairly low. And by ceramic, I mean the big cement block wire wounds. Whereas metal film and metal oxide are totally fine for that purpose, and they come in so many different values. You can really be precise if you want, but don't worry about being too precise, because it's gonna, every time you change tubes or the wall voltages change, it's gonna be a little bit different anyway. You can never have precision cathode biasing and that, but you don't need it. As long as it's between 12 and 14 watts at idle, you're good. Is it possible to get the, thank you again for yet another super chat, man. You're going to fund my coffee for a good long while. You should have been on the channel a long time ago. I'd be rich. Since Mesa build quality is so bad, do I think it's possible to get the Mark series tone with enough EQing in front of a BE100? Whew. Well, two things come to mind. First of all, to get closer to the Mark behavior, you put the EQ in, you want to put the graphic EQ in the effects loop of a BE100, so that the graphic EQ is coming after all the gain stages, because that's what's going on in the Mark series. They have a Fender preamp, and then they put it through a ton more gain, and because of all that gain, it undoes all the tone controls that are offered in the Fender preamp. And rather than say, oh wait, we need to put all that gain before the preamp circuit, they just add another graphic EQ circuit after that. So it's really a Band-Aid that they marketed brilliantly. It's like that heat sink on the back that's on the preamp end, away from anything that gets hot. It's a marketing heat sink. It's a marketing graphic EQ to show that they are not, in fact, amp designers or engineers. But if you want to emulate that, put the graphic EQ in the effects loop of your Friedman or other high gain amp, and that will give that kind of sculpting ability. My second thought is, if your Friedman BE100 is sounding like a Mark series, that's a downgrade. Man, the BE100 is a really interesting sounding amp with a lot of character and dynamic response, and to turn that into the classic Mesa Mark series tone, which is kind of flat and saturated and Bumblebee-like. I'd rather just use a Big Muff into a Twin myself. But the EQ in the effects loop is the answer you're actually looking for. And you'll probably get a sound that's much better than the Mark, but it'll give you a lot of the same sculpting options. Replace the filament circuit wiring, artificial center tap 100 ohm in place of the V4. I'm still present. Of course, when increasing the mesh volume. Well, yeah, you got a ground issue somewhere. And when I see the amp sent to me, I'll be able to say, there it is. And here's why that's a problem. Because sent to me is balancing the Mojo Tone layout with what he saw in my videos. And it's his first Marshall rodeo. And so maybe we'll, with his permission, we'll put that in a video to say, hey, here's why this can get you. But you're being bit by something simple. But if this is the first time you've built one, it's not simple to you. It's just, it's one of many thousand needles in that haystack. And I'll be able to show you what the problem is and why that's a problem, what the fix is. I can either do it for you or you can do it yourself, because you can go forth armed with some new and specific knowledge. Let's see. Okay, 2-Rock speakers are ET65, 80-watt versions of the ET65. Well, then the 2-Rock speakers would sound fantastic in a Twin or any other similar Fender-derived amplifier. And the G65 Celestion and the Creamback 65 are very similar to the ET65, but they're all slightly different from each other. I'm happy with any of those. Those put me in a happy place. All right, I'm gonna skip this question, Greg, because please, everyone, it really makes your questions stand out from the chat. It's not because I'm being finicky. It's just if I don't see those question marks, I often don't see the question. I know I've skipped people in the past because of that. I caught yours though. So Greg Bronson has a Bronson amp from the 40s. How long have you been alive, man? And having a hard time getting it to work. 360 volt AC direct fire tube, 5Y3, output 45 to 266. Okay, you got a speaker coil, a field coil speaker, rather. All right. Is the field coil speaker good? That's the number one trick. And there are two things that your field coil speaker does. First of all, it acts like a choke. Typically, usually that's used as a choke, and its behavior in the circuit as a choke also gives it enough of a electrical charge that the speaker operates. So you need to make sure that the speaker is good. Most field coil speakers I've encountered have needed to be reconed at the least. Some of them I've need to have the coil rewound because things age in bad ways. And so what I do in that situation is I disconnect the field coil speaker. I'll put in like a 10 watt 1K resistor in place of it, and that acts as the choke. That's close enough for test purposes. A 10 watt 1K cement, the big white blocky wire wound where the field coil part of the speaker was connected. And then I'll temporarily connect a 1/4-inch jack and then run it to whatever speaker that I need to use, 4 ohm, 8 ohm, and see if the amp works otherwise. Because if you got a bad speaker, a bad field coil speaker, you can't troubleshoot the rest of it. You got to do that in isolation. And remember, you always have the option to replace a field coil speaker with a standard modern speaker and replace the choke functionality of the old field coil with either a resistor, which can be appropriate for what's usually a kind of a student level amp, or a physical choke if you wish. So follow that as a troubleshooting guide and see if that helps, because it's really hard to know what's going on in the speaker if the field coil itself is bad. It's hard to know what's going on in the amp circuit in total if that one aspect is bad. Hey man, I'm glad you're enjoying it. 5F6As are such a nice amp, and the reissue is particularly good with those changes. It's not because I'm inherently clever or anything. It's just those changes were so obvious. Like, why do they have two 22 microfarads in parallel? That's just way too much filtering for a bassman. It was just some bizarre choices in the reissues. But good bones. I'm glad it's working for you. Speaking of the Fireball, Brad, I saw you post a question or comment on my photo of the race, and they were handing out, and you're like, whiskey? What the hell kind of race is that? They were shots of Fireball, and it was a very fun race apparently on the Flickr thing. I only saw your question yesterday or the day before, though you asked it a couple weeks ago, so I didn't mean to leave you hanging, man. I think that Bad Cat are equally as good as Matchless, but I don't think that Matchless is very good. Matchless and Bad Cat, in my experience, make really awful mistakes again and again, have a fundamentally flawed approach to how tubes should be biased, and as proof of that, they like to catch on fire, and their face plates melt and crack because the chassis gets so hot because everything is being biased too hot. And if you need to replace anything, it takes 30 times longer because they don't follow mil spec. They do multiple wraps of things. It's stuff that impresses people who don't know how amps should be built. I'm not sure why they have such a mystique. I have never, you know, there's reality and there's marketing. I can't argue with the marketing. I can only stick to the reality. Yeah, bad cats are just as matchless. Oh, thanks, Did. Well, I don't know if all the matchless owners appreciate me. I'm not all communities appreciate me equally. I do. I hear people. I hear when people are thankful and appreciative, and that means a lot to me. I'm not doing this. I don't make a tremendous amount of money out of the YouTube thing. I don't get a tremendous ego boost from this because after this, I go to the grocery store knowing whose I am. But it does mean a lot to me when I know that I've substantively helped someone understand something, or solve a problem, or avoid a problem, or find their forever amp, or at least avoid the amp that would have just drained their wallet. So, thank you. Hey, no problem lying about having questions. Good. All right, Merlin's got a new book. Good. About damn time too, Merlin. If you ever see this, I've never spoken to the man. I've never emailed the man. Had no communication with him. I'm admiring him from a distance, but I do admire him. Yeah, the 5150 Iconics are even worse than the regular 5150s. What is my opinion of 70s Ampeg V4s? They are way too loud and way too heavy and way too unreliable to recommend unless you are a diehard Ampeg aficionado or a diehard Stones aficionado with the budget to have them maintained. They're very poorly built. The screen supply has way too much voltage for current production tubes. They need a lot of help. They have terrible ground schemes, and like most Ampegs of that era, the PCBs are thin, they flex, all the components break. They've got tropical caps and those little green caps that all need to be changed out. So you, it's louder than and heavier than a twin. Doesn't sound as good as a twin, and to repair one and maintain it costs more than a twin. Not more than it costs to maintain and repair a twin. To maintain and repair a V4 can often cost more than it costs to buy a twin reverb. So I can't recommend them too much. They are really great if you want to sound like Keith Richards, and for people 5 blocks away to hear you sounding like Keith Richards. But there are other amps that will also make you sound very, very good without the reliability and cost issues. Any thought on Silver Jubilee 100-watt reissue? Well, the Silver Jubilee reissue, the recent ones that I've seen have the little green plastic pots. I don't think they're fantastic. They may have a larger series that are closer to the originals. I've not had one. I really like the old Silver Jubilees. And I think might have had a reissue that had real full-size pots. That's the thing. Marshall will do like this year's version of the reissues is the cheap version. The next year is closer to being good quality. The Silver Jubilee has got a real interesting tone stack and how the bass works. It's got one of the best clean sounds of any Marshall out there. I'm not a huge fan of the red LED clipping. And as far as channel switching, a Silver Jubilee, it's almost pointless. This amp does this sound, and unless I change the input jack and push all these buttons differently, you can't go from clean to dirty or dirty to lead, and then back to clean in a modern channel changing sense. It's not like the amp has different channels; it has different personalities. But I like the sound of those personalities. But I have not tried the Lurkst Omega that Mojitone is doing for Lifeson. I know stylistically it looks like a Silver Jubilee, and I think Lifeson has said that it's based on some Silver Jubilee and 800 stuff. I'd be interested to know what the clean circuit in that is. What are the main things you do when designing or fixing an amp that keeps the white noise the lowest it can be? Shielding, shielding, shielding. Ground scheme, ground scheme, ground scheme. Layout, layout, layout. Let's see, the best way to show this. I use these lens caps. All right. Each of these lens caps here, pretend it's the end of a capacitor. You're looking at a capacitor end on. This capacitor, the signal from one stage is passing through this capacitor. The signal from the other stage is passing through this capacitor. If they are here, there is much less noise being injected from one to the next than if they're here. And if they're here, there's much less noise being injected from one stage to the next than if they're here. And here is much quieter than here. And it's not like touching is a little bit quieter than them being apart half an inch. This is a lot quieter. It's an exponential. It's a inverse proportion, inverse square. As you double the distance between the things, the noise level drops by a lot more than half. And so space between components, especially components within a triode stage, is crucial. So when you have an amp, like say a Mesa, and everything's jammed next to each other, then the noise in this stage may bleed over into noise from this stage. You look at a Friedman, you look at a vintage Marshall, you look at a Suhr, they're going to have space between these things. Now some of that space on the older amps was just a matter-of-fact thing because they had turret boards or they had eyelet boards, and there was 0.375 inch, 3/8 of an inch space between the turrets or the eyelets at a minimum, so that forced the parts away. But when you're designing an amp, especially with PCB, but also with turret or eyelet, if as much space as you can put between components in different parts of the circuit, you're going to get real predictable and measurable benefits from that. And that's one of the main things. So when I see an amp that's this big and the board fills the entire thing and everything's jam-packed together, I'm like, that is an amp of convenience, but it is not the best way to do that. That same circuit that's this big in the amp, if the amp were this big and everything were spread out, would be a much better sounding amp. Look at the Mike Soldano SLO 100, the Soldano SLO, the ones that Mike did himself. That is the way to do it, because there's a ton of space between it, this and that and the next thing, and they're all laid out, and the ground scheme is good, and it's very logical. And what's interesting to me is a well-designed amp, when everything is done logically and everything is done with best practice throughout, it also ends up being beautiful. The form follows the function. Let's see. PV amp with the speaker problem was a PV Audition Chorus. Well, Christina, I'm not familiar with the Audition Chorus, but I bet if you were to Google replacement speaker PV Audition Chorus, someone's already figured that out and will tell you what to do. But if not, it's at 9-volt RMS. That seems like an odd measurement to if it's printed on the spec, but usually you can say, hey, all right, the original speaker was 15 watts. I want something that's at least 15 watts. 20 would be better. 25, 30 would be great if I could fit it in there. And same impedance and same dimensions. And it'll sound at least as good as the originals. The originals probably weren't good sounding speakers. And a PV with 6-inch speakers. But I'm not familiar with that model, sorry. Let's see. Let's see. Get to the next question. I'm getting through. We're at the intermission. All right. Well, Brad, you ever get here? I'll take you to get a sausage biscuit. It's just perfect. You know, you probably never had an American biscuit, a true American biscuit from the southern region of America as opposed to South American. What's the last amp that stopped me in my tracks? As in, so beautiful and stunning that I just can't function, or as in I don't know how to fix this thing. The last amp that I could not fix was of all things, it was a TC bass amp, one of their new cheap solid state things. Well, I say new, in the last 5-10 years probably. And it had a multi-layer board. The PCB was multi-layered, and I knew the output of the circuit was working and the input of the circuit was working, and I knew where the signal was lost, and I knew where the signal started again, but there was something in between circuit-wise, and I couldn't find it to connect the dots. And the amp was only worth so much, and I had spent X amount of time in it, and I couldn't fix it because it was a multi-layer PCB, which means that there's a layer on top and a layer on bottom, no problem, and there are two more layers inside. It's 3 or 4 layers sandwiched together, and something was wrong with the trace inside. Might have been burnt, might have been arcing. I couldn't physically see or access it or measure it, and there was no schematic other than I had a schematic for a similar model in that series, but all the part numbers were different and all the connectors were different. And I had to give up on it because, once you do traces on the interior of a board, that's no longer it's designed not to be field serviceable anymore. That's designed to be, hey, that dies under warranty, change out the board. Dies out if the warranty expires, it goes in the landfill. Anytime you can make it over here, you come on over, man. I saw you, your video. I didn't have time to watch it. I apologize. It's been a hectic week, but I saw you had a video where you were playing in Nashville. Hope you had a good time. Hope you didn't have any of the nasty hot chicken. There's nothing wrong with hot sauce on chicken, just the fried chicken in Nashville. Yeah, it's just a spicy slider. It's better than that. Better than that, especially if you get a hot country sausage. I don't have any thoughts on the StewMac Tweed kits, David Burnett, because I've not tried any, though I'm pretty sure the StewMac kits are just Mojo Tone kits, in which case they're going to be absolutely fine. And Brad's got a video for you on a StewMac kit build. And now you have to remember there's the kit and there's the builder. And they're not always, you can have a great kit with great directions and a builder, whoever put it together, can do a horrible job. Sometimes you have a kit with pretty good parts and the directions are unclear and the owner is doing their best, and it's hard to know. I have seen home built kit build amps that people have done really great jobs with. I've seen things where they did everything like 30 times harder than it needed to be. Just did everything at a meticulous, ready for the James Webb Telescope level, but the amp doesn't sound right because they connected something in the wrong place. And I've seen absolute nightmares where it's not the problem that it's a kit amp, it's that they just let anyone build these things. And not everyone is qualified to do this. And I'm not saying that because I am inherently better than anyone. I'm just better at this one little thing in life than an awful lot of people. It's all right. I suck at basketball, mostly from disinterest. Do you lengthen the life of a Class D amp by keeping the output far shy of the wattage it's rated for? Yeah, you do not want to. You do not want to push a Class D to its rated maximum because there's always a spike on a transient or something that exceeds that. So you always want to build in a little leeway. So if you wanted to make a 500 watt Class D amp, you'd want to have the amp capable of being 600 watts, but you're only limiting it to 500. So you got to have some headroom in there. But I don't design modern hi-fi stuff. And I think a lot of the guys who are seriously doing Class D are more in the modern hi-fi world. So I don't think the attributes of Class D make it a fantastic choice for guitar. There's sound reproduction and there's sound production. And so I think for guitar and to a lesser extent bass, we're doing sound production. Bass is kind of modern bass is straddling the line between sound production, signal generation, and hi-fi reproduction. And a lot of the Class D stuff is great for bass because you need to have that transient, but you also don't want to blow it up. And it's pretty easy to blow up if you're stressing things right on the edge. As far as I know, Jupiters are made by WGS. They're just a different spec. But I have not tried one that's labeled with Jupiter in a long time. The 12 LC is going to sound very different than the GA SC64, both of which are going to sound fantastic, but they're different flavors of fantastic. So I can't tell you if you want Fudge Ripple or Rocky Road. It's going to be, you may want a different one on different days, in which case you end up with two cabs with two speakers. That's how we end up here. It's a sickness. Hey, Captain Grumpus, speaking of which, you got a Jupiter for his Vibrochamp. The break-in circuits, I'd probably hook it up to Variac for a couple hours and just move that cone, get that paper working out, making all the spider, get all creaks and out and getting it good at moving and just taking all it's like just you got a nice Tin Man there, just need a little oil can and it's ready to go. It just takes a little time to do that. These are photos of our trip to Lisbon running in the background. Last week I had photos I've taken around the neighborhood running in the background. This time I've got photos from our trip to Lisbon running, just to have something changing, so it's not just a static shot. Maybe someday I'll do our travels video. I've got it, but I know I'm going to have to put it by. This is not an amp video. This is not an amp video. This is not an amp video. Or I'll get on here and I'll start to do it, and people are like, "Hey, my Classic 50 started to." That's the trouble about having a channel that's about one thing. I was talking to Zach last week. We were talking about YouTube in general and how strange and wonderful it can be in different ways. And he said, "Well, what made you do this?" And I told him and all that. And it's like, but at the same time, as much as I've really enjoyed the chance to meet people from all around the world, and it means a lot to me. I still appreciate that, and I love being here. At the same time, it's kind of like if you're really well known for your ability to change tires, and all anyone ever wants to talk to you about is changing tires, and you're like, I like driving them too. That's not just, there are other things in life I'm interested in beyond electronics and apps. For whatever reason, people seek me out for this, but I do get tired of that being my world. So we try to travel whenever we can. Speaking of which, I won't be doing this stream next Saturday. We're going to be out of town. Just recharge the batteries a little bit, doing something. Wes says I should start a travel and lifestyle channel where you can share photos, recipes, and cool Memphis stuff. Well, I appreciate that, Wes. I'm not sure if anyone wants any lifestyle tips from me, though I think I have been losing some weight the past month or so as I've been going on those walks almost every day. I'm trying to. But I can tell I've definitely lost a little bit. But I have thought about doing a second channel about not lifestyle, but photography, because I've really gotten into taking stills photos. Of course, the name of the channel might need to be not another goddamn camera channel. I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. But there's a lot of things I want to talk about that aren't germane to the amp stuff. But I don't want to pollute the amp stuff. But I don't know. Maybe it would be photos and with and travel and occasional Memphis thing, because the photos can incorporate all the Memphis stuff, but some food stuff as well. It does get wearing to always be talking about guitar apps because they're not intrinsically that interesting to me. I know that's a weird thing to say, but here he is. What can cause a lopsided sine wave on the output? Slope going up looks normal, but the slope going down is steeper. Output tubes were swapped with no difference. So many things, man. I don't know if it's a Class A/B amp. I don't know if it's a fixed bias amp. I don't know if it's a cathode biased amp. You could have a problem with negative feedback. You could have a problem with the output transformer. You can have a problem with the phase inverter. I would need a lot more information than that. How does it sound, though, before we get into any of that? Does it sound okay? Sometimes amps sound great, and the sine waves are kind of funky looking. Sometimes the sine waves look great, and the amps don't sound very good. So, give me some more information. I'll revisit that. Hey, Papi Chulo, I like the Celestion Blue a lot in an AC15 or AC30. It is the classic combination. I also like the greenback. I would keep the blue installed in the amp and maybe get a 1x12 matching or otherwise, stick the greenback in it, and then for larger gigs you'd have two speakers. It'd be almost as loud as an AC30. You can mic both. You can mic one or the other, change the sound on stage, even if you're hearing it coming out of the amp, pretty much the same. Or sell the greenback or hold on to the greenback as a spare. But my preference would be the blue, but I also like the sound of that amp with the greenback. I don't like the greenback in all open back cabs. I think it sounds really good in the AC15 custom. I think it's the dimensions of the cab really suit a greenback really well. Papi Chulo says 61 Ampeg R12R. It sounds great. I'm sorry. Sorry, not Papi Chulo. That was sorry. I got two screens here. That was Sean McGarvey. Yeah. All right. So if your Ampeg sounds great, I wouldn't worry about the sine wave on the output. Most Ampegs from that time period had funky things happening. I think you got a paraphase phase inverter there, so that could be normal. But most paraphase and cathodiene phase inverters never have a truly balanced output. And I think you've got a paraphase. So situation normal. Enjoy. There's no inherent benefit to having a symmetrical output. In fact, it's really hard to achieve a truly symmetrical output, no matter the topology. So if it sounds good, it is good. Why are some pot shafts on old Fenders plastic and some are metal? Because they were not the primary market for CTS or Burns, or back in the day, Central Labs. Central Labs was making things for much larger industries than guitar. So back in the day, we think of it as like old things happen in movies. This telephone switchboards, with the operator, Baker's 192, whatever, just unplug this and plug this in. All those things had pots. All those things had switches. Airplanes used physical potentiometers. everything that we now do on the phone with a little swipe of our finger was a pot. And so Central Labs and Burns and all these companies, they were making pots for Oldsmobile, making pots for General Electric, making pots for Ma Bell. You know, one location of one location of the telephone company's location for one moderate city would be more pots than are used in the entire Fender amp production. So Fender couldn't say, "Hey, I need a pot made." Fender would get whatever pot they had, and he needed a reverse audio 50K. Well, you get what was already on the market, and then later CTS started to get, I think, from different vendors. You can see the pots change from 67 through about 72. So they same thing. Even though CBS had a larger scale of production and deeper pockets than Fender did, it's still using what's already made. And some of those series, especially the reverse audio stuff like the 50K and the 3 meg, those would be plastic shaft, and the others would be metal. There's no useful or significant difference in the behavior or reliability of the pots, other than the nylon shaft ones can be sheared off, but it happens pretty rarely. Hey, Jim Jewell, got a 67 Blackface Bassman that I've converted to a hybrid AA864. You can see that in the thumbnail for this video. This 67's almost done in that part of the conversion. I have 1 watt metal oxide screen grids on the 6L6s, but they're scorching after a few minutes of playing on 5. What's wrong? Did you reverse the green and black wires on the speaker jack? The green and black secondaries of the output transformer, did you reverse those where they connect to the output jack so black goes to ground and green goes to tip? Because in the stock AB165, as it was, those are reversed because the output section used essentially positive feedback, then they reversed it at the output jack, which made it negative feedback. You probably have some kind of underlying oscillation to cause that, and that would be a likely cause. Not all oscillation is directly audible in the output. You don't always get squeal, you don't always get hum or anything. You just have things like that where it's just eating your circuit alive. Either that or you've got some very bad tubes. I usually use a 2 watt screen grid resistor on 6L6s, but even a 1 watt should last just fine unless something's really wrong. So you may have oscillation, or you may have 1 or more bad 6L6s, which is also possible. But it's not normal. I have no knowledge of the Verellen device's octal tube replacement yet. I keep hearing about these things, but I'll wait till I have one to test before I have any opinion on it or get my hopes up that any of that stuff's going to work, because I think they've been trying to get funding for forever. It's really easy to have an idea. Let's see how the idea comes to reality. Well, damn, Wes, you got me hungry again. I just convinced myself I wasn't hungry, and now I'm hungry all over again. Now I just need some good crusty bread, some real good butter. Hey, 1217, is the power transformer on a 40 watt Bassman 10 to support I guess you mean able to support another 12X7? It should be fine. 12X7 adds what? 600 milliamps? You should be all right. I wouldn't. As I said earlier in the chat, I wouldn't put much time or money into changing a Basement 10, but you can do it if you want to. Don't drill for another AX7 though. There are better ways around it. It's not going to be a Marshall. It doesn't matter what you do. You know, anyone. I don't mean this as any kind of insult to you. I get this kind of question a lot. And anyone who has any business making big sweeping changes to a Basement 10 or any model to make the amp significantly different than it is would not need to ask these kinds of questions. And anyone who has questions like this probably will not be able to achieve what they want and might end up devaluing what they already have. And I'm not trying to gatekeep. I'm not trying to say that you're not good enough or that people shouldn't try things. But the internet is full of, hey, 5 easy things you could do to make your Princeton a Marshall, stuff. The internet overpromises and underdelivers. And so I'm here to put, as much as I can, my brakes on that corner of it. Some things are not good ideas. Some things are a lot harder than people think. Sometimes, well, yes, you could, but have you considered that you then have to X, Y, Z, and Q? And all these things take time and money. And sometimes, hey, I just want this sound. Well, fuck, man, save up a little longer and buy the thing that already does that. You're going to be happier in the long run. What's the French designation mean for the lentil soup versus the most famous French onion? Well, French onion, they don't say French, they say soupe à l'oignon. And for the lentils, what makes them French is they go on strike every Saturday. Amp for apartment use, Blackface Champ or Tweed Deluxe. Is there a big volume sound difference? Yeah, the Tweed Deluxe is a lot louder than the Blackface Champ. Tweed Deluxe is a better sounding amp to me than a Tweed Champ. And I love a Vibro Champ or Blackface Champ, but it depends on your apartment, how thin the walls are, what your neighbors are like, what hours you want to play. Because, a Tweed Deluxe is a loud amp. That's a 15 watt amp. And it's going to be AC 15 loud. You can do fantastic low volume clean sounds out of it. You might be happier if just for practice. You could go with a Blackface Champ or Vibro Champ at all. But, that's the traditional answer. We have so many good options now. There's nothing wrong with getting an HX Stomp or what is it called, Tonex, or just plugging straight into an audio interface and calling it all up in Logic or GarageBand or Reaper or whatever you have. There's so many good options, many of which are even free these days, besides owning a analog to digital converter interface. For practice, for apartment use, I could plug my guitar into this Motu M2, call up it's not the Neural Amp Modeler, but it's something similar to that. There's a plugin, a Neural plugin that I could open up in Logic, which I could also put into GarageBand, and plug my headphones in and call up all kinds of delays and reverbs and distortions and headphones and be happy practicing and not get evicted, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, all night long, and the neighbors would never know. And that's for the cost of a used M2 or Scarlett, $100 or less. It's really easy to get into apartment practice happiness. It doesn't mean that you would not prefer to play the Vibro Champ. It doesn't mean that you would not prefer to play the 5E3 Deluxe. But, you're talking minimum volume on those things. It's going to be the 70 to 75 dB range pretty fast. And you slip up and you're going to be like, well, I thought I was still quiet, but it got good to me. And you end up louder than you think. Also, our ears get used to a certain level, and then we want more. So you can, despite your best interest, you could be playing your little VibroChamp at 90 dB without 85, 90 dB, and your neighbor's not going to be happy with you. So these are all factors. Dan D should shield every grid in a train wreck design. And not only should you shield them, but you should look at how Ken Fisher used silicone to hold the grid connections, the shielded grids, to the chassis right by the tube sockets. So he didn't want that shielded wire vibrating at all. And he also dampened the chassis itself with strips of foam adhesive. That's very, very important. All right, I'm going to get Keith at Cheap Bar Studio because he gave me a super chat. Then we're going to take our second break. Thank you very much. Previous suggestions on 78 Twin, new glass all around. Cheers from New Zealand. Well, cheers from Memphis, Keith. Thanks for being here. We're going to take the second intermission. Went a little bit over because I got all caught up in all this stuff because it's fun to be the center of attention once in a while. I promise I'll go back to being ignored the rest of the week. Anyway, see you guys in 7 minutes. I know you guys saw me just sitting here like a bump on a log. I didn't end the break early because I was scrolling through to find the next question. Any thoughts on the old trainer YBA1 basement? It seems to be similar to a Basemaster. It seems to be similar to basement. Yeah, I love the YBA1 Basemaster. I've got some on the channel. I think they're fantastic. Need a little bit of help. You need to get rid of you gotta fix the ground scheme. You gotta get rid of the stupid 5 amp circuit breaker, put in a fuse. A couple other little things, and they tend to have the linear taper pots with you'll shoot your eye out bright cap, but those are all addressable, and then they're phenomenal amps. I've never seen, let alone serviced, a silk tone amp. Sorry, Murky Fluid. Ever dealt with PV muting for a couple? Ever deal with? Try this again. BC Electronics. Ever deal with a PV muting for a couple of seconds and coming back? I'm thinking DC protection or short protection circuit. You got to dive in and work it out this week. I'm not familiar with the Tour Series 700. I know usually you run into that in the Butcher and VTM and 5150s, where they have a muting circuit that's supposed to mute the circuit at the moment you change channel so you don't get a pop, but their muting circuit tends to die. If yours is intermittent, it may be a cap which is failing in the low voltage power supply that triggers the muting transistors, because when those die, they tend to just die. They don't kind of sort of work. But you may have something which is just taking a while to build up until it can operate as a capacitor again. Hope that's not too esoteric. I think given your username, you know what I'm talking about. Sorry, it just scrolled on me. Are the JJ EL 844s a good way to control AC15 volume while preserving tone? Also, do I like the JJ ECC 803S tubes? Thanks. Hey, Poppy. I've not tried the EL 844s, and I don't remember. I think the ECC 803S is like 70% gain on one side. They're probably fine, but usually the AC30s or AC15s, I just go with the EL84s and the ECC 83s. And the AC15 that you have has got a pretty useful master volume. I don't know that I would change tube types, but you know, give it a try. It can't hurt. If you don't like it, you don't like it. If you like it, you like it, but there's no permanent change to the amp. So it's a pretty safe thing to experiment with. Keep scrolling. Why is it scrolling? I just realized what a biscuit is to Brad. A sausage biscuit in that context would be like the worst Oreo imaginable. Yeah. I figured with the McDonald'sification of the world, they'd have biscuits in Australia now. Well, I don't know what they call them, but I've not tried McDonald's in Australia. I've not tried McDonald's in Paris or England either, because why would I go to McDonald's when I'm traveling the world? I've got them here. Though I have seen through the window that the menu is different. I imagine they would do pretty well if they introduced the American biscuit to the rest of the world. It's like a scone, a softer, more buttery scone. It definitely comes from the Scottish tradition. It just changed up a little bit here and became even tastier. Not what we call a cookie. Closer to what you call a scone, or a kind of in between a scone and an English muffin. Well, McMuffin in New Zealand and Australia, that's done here. The Egg McMuffin and other McMuffins are done on a English muffin, which is also great. And it's my favorite thing at McDonald's is the Egg McMuffin. And I don't like a lot of things at McDonald's, but they also offer sausage biscuits and chicken on sausage, at least here in America. I'm sure they do in Canada as well. I don't know what they have on their international menus. The trouble, the wonder of a sausage biscuit outside of the U.S., most of the rest of the world, their sausages are not like a Southern sausage. I'm Scottish and it's pronounced scone. That's terrible. I wasn't ready to do that. Scone, scone. Yeah, it's. I've heard it both ways in England, and when last I had scones, I was explaining to Nikki the different approaches between Devon and Cornwall, but we preferred the cream beneath the clotted cream on top of the jam, if that helps. I wish I had some scones with clotted cream and some raspberry jam right now, or some of Wes's goddamn soup. Nothing from McDonald's for me, but most of America does not have a very good sausage. Most of the rest of the world, the sausage tends towards the sweet or towards the blood. If you ever come here, and I'll get you an authentic Southern country sausage, it's hot and spicy. Very different thing. And McDonald's doesn't have any sausage that compares. If it's not Scottish, it's crap. Yeah, Victor, he sent me the 53, which I thought was pretty good. And then I asked him to send me the broadcaster, and I like the broadcaster better. So that's what's in there. Hey, 74 Canal installed an LN150 based effects loop in a Mojo Studio 1 amp. And notice a slight 100 hertz hum. I guess you're in Europe or some other places. Got 50 hertz mains. I powered it and grounded the FX loop ground from the first node of the power supply. I imagine it's a matter. I think you've probably found where you have the place where you have the issue. I'm unfamiliar with the Studio One amp. I don't know which node to power it from or ground it to fix that, but that's going to be the thing. You can probably keep the power from where it's ever coming from, but just return the ground to a different point. But I would contact whoever made that effects loop, or contact Mojo Tone and see if they have any thoughts. I don't know that Studio One circuit. Is the 2210 the split channel reverb, Scott? Sorry for those of you looking where I'm at in the chat. It won't make any sense, but I see where I'm at in the chat, and I see what's happening live down there. Down there. I got two different windows up at once. I think is the 2210 the split channel reverb, in which case avoid. Crappy amps. 25% of stated output for Class D. See, I don't do Class D design. Well, that might explain why so many Class D amps smoke their ICE power modules. People are usually trying to get every little oomph out of it. Doesn't matter if it has direct transformers in it. Split channel reverb sounds like ass, and then it's got horrible channel switching. Just get a 2203 or 2204 if you want a JC 100, or make your own kind of thing. But the split channel reverb's not a very good sounding Marshall. Sorry. If you out there and own one, you're obviously right and I'm obviously wrong. But yeah, well, $1,000 is not much of a bargain for an app that's never going to sound that great. I don't like the split channel reverb. You might have noticed. I've fixed a few of them, but the switching circuit is so stupid. And even when it's working, and not very good clean sound, and not very inspiring dirty sound. What are my thoughts on the Supro Blues King 12-inch 15-watt amp? Thanks. Hey, Hurler Herbert. I have a couple of Supros up on the channel. You can look for those, and they're really amazingly poorly built. insultingly poorly built. They use the crappiest jacks. They don't use tooth washers. They're not tight from the factory. Among a host of other issues where they have the Supro name, they bought the Supro name, and they're using it to market to people, but they're not making anything. I mean, and the old Supro amps were not ever any good, but they were better than this, and they were built to last, a few years at least. Supros have always been dime store amps, and now they're not even penny amps, but they certainly cost more than a penny. I would avoid anything that says Supro on it. And if you want something that does the thing, really does the thing, that says that has that vibe, check out the Sun Dragon amps. That's the production version of the Jimmy Page Supro model. They're expensive, but they're worth it. And all the other things that say Supro just say Supro, but they're not very good amps. There's so many good amps out there for very little money you can get. Supro is not one of them. Dylan Talk. I can't do anything like Dylan Talk's tone. I don't have a hat big enough. Dude's got giant hats. And Joseph Baraja say the French do like a good strike. Well, thank you for agreeing with me, Joseph, but I think you might be a little bit behind in the chat. On the chat window down here should be a current time and a say live, and if it's got a red dot, you're current. If it's white, you're behind. It'll probably say like white negative 1233, and you click on that, it'll catch you up to current in the chat. Sounds like you're behind the rest of us if you're at my lentils joke. Not many people make lentils jokes, so you're in the right place if that's what you want. In fact, I do a wide range of legume humor, not just what they already covered ad nauseum in Blazing Saddles. Have I heard Friedman is looking to do an AC30? Well, I've spoken to Dave. He says he's definitely doing it as he has the time, and he's had other things demanding his attention, but he's definitely going to be doing one. I hope it's great. I have every expectation that it'll be fantastic. And then I can mod it and make it right. He'll see that. He'll know I'm kidding. Or am I? Dave knows I'm a jerk. It's fine. It's an 8-ohm speaker with the amp set on the 8-ohm position. You can all, well, yeah, the AC, are you talking about AC15? It's got an external option. You can have the internal or an external speaker, or you can have the internal and an external. So you had 8-ohm internal, 8-ohm external, use them both together, just connect it and flip the switch over to 4 ohms, you're fine. Can a 20-watt head drive into a 4x10 cabinet if both are 8 ohms? Absolutely, they can. Noslin 954. Absolutely. What you don't want to ever do is run an amp that has too much wattage for whatever speakers you're connecting it to. So if you had a 100-watt Marshall, you don't want to connect it to a Princeton, which has a 20-watt speaker. You don't want to use the 20-watt speaker from a Princeton with a great big amp. But you can use a tiny little amp driving a huge speaker cabinet as long as the impedance is close enough. Won't hurt a thing. Hey, Chris Harrop's contemplating building a single-ended amp with a higher wattage output like KT88. Any thoughts on a circuit as a starting point? Man, look at the, what is that group? AX84 group. They've got so many variants on there over the years on champs with added gain stages. And with a little bit of knowledge and consulting data sheets, you could easily adapt one of those circuits to be done with a KT88. And so many ways to do cascaded gain things, basically make a little fire-breathing JCM 800 front end into a single-ended thing. If that floats your boat, look at the AX84 forum. They're still out there, and the schematics are still floating around. Some of them have layouts. Why do I think so many poorly built amps are popular with professional musicians? They can afford to have them serviced all the time? Well, no. Some of the big musicians, they don't have them serviced all the time. They get new ones when the old ones die, or they switch in companies they endorse. As to why musicians buy bad amps, I wanted to do it for a long time because came up in the 80s and 90s reading Guitar Player and Guitar World, and I'd see these big full color spreads for all these amp companies. And I didn't know the amps were absolute shit, and this looks awesome. And look, Vernon Reid's playing a Mesa now, and the review would always be fantastic. The review done by the person working for the magazine of the company that just took out a 6-month contract to have full color 2-page ads in every issue is always positive for some reason. And the endorser of the Metaltronics or the Kitty Hawk 6 months later is endorsing this other company, and 6 months later is endorsing this other company. Everyone is trying to chase the supplier, so we're the people who were consistent. Everyone played Kramer guitars in 1987. Kramer guitars were rarely very good, but they were in, and they had the color ads, and they had the guys from Whitesnake, and they had the Van Halen for a while, and they had this for a while. And people wanted to be Player X. And Player X has this guitar and this haircut and this bandana wrapped around his waist and his leather pants. And he was playing the amp that he was endorsing at the time. And you save up and you buy that. And then a year later, your hero has something else. And you're like, but now I don't have the thing. Vernon Reid was an example because I remember when he switched to Mesa, and he was in all the ads. And I thought it was really cool that Mesa featured an artist of color so prominently. That was great. But same for Doug Wimbish being promoted at the same time. But so it stuck in my memory, but they were crappy amps. You're not going to get hate from me, Scott. Rivera era Fenders are garbage. Not because of Paul, but because of Fender at the time cheaping out on Paul's designs. I can't speak to why the sheep run in certain directions at certain times of the day. I can tell you what lasts, and I noticed that Soldano didn't have a lot of endorsers. I'm trying to think if anyone who's endorsed Soldano. I think the only person I can think of was Warren Haynes. I could be wrong on that, but versus the people who would in companies that had like Poison as their endorsers. Great big ads, crappy amps in comparison with other things. Crappy band. I don't have a preference for series or era of greenbacks, and I don't chase the pre-roll stuff. I can't keep it all. I can't keep track of it. Our Guitar 78, because there's so many variables, and I don't actually have a collection of old amps and speakers and stuff like a lot of people do. So I have my opinions based on the things I experience. But I can't afford to seek out. Freeman's got he has like 3 or 4 really great sounding cabs, and he's tried all these different speakers, but he's got space to keep 3 or 4 4x12s and play them at volume. I don't have space or the inclination or the time. So I've heard speakers from every era be great and every era be bad. So if I put a distortion pedal in front of a Fender type amp and put an EQ in the effects loop, I can get something akin to a Mesa series tone. Not quite, because Mesa didn't do it that way. If you want it to sound like a Mesa, you plug into the Fender, you go out on an effects loop into an overdrive, and make it a pretty bad overdrive, and then into the EQ. Because Mesa put all the gain stages after the clean stage and after the EQ that's built into the amp. So because they had all this gain afterwards, the EQ pre-shaped the signal going to the EQ, but doesn't make any going into the gain, but could not really radically shape that. So then they put the graphic on as a Band-Aid. So if you want to make it sound like the Mesa, you go into a Fender with an effects loop, then go out to a not very good sounding overdrive pedal, then into a Boss graphic EQ, then come back into the amp. That's the way to chase the Mesa thing. But running into an overdrive pedal or distortion pedal in front of a Fender with an EQ in the effects loop or an EQ between the distortion pedal and the amp, that's how to get some pretty good sounds that you've heard on a lot of records. Thoughts on master volume for Super R reissue? We're gonna have the longevity upgrades done. Super Reverb reissue. Yeah, I don't have one shown on a Super Reverb reissue, but I've got one where I showed installing a master volume on like a 65 or 66 Super Reverb, and it counts the same. I do a Larmar. That's the best sounding, reliable, non-invasive, easily reversible way to do master volume. The pros are a long list, and the cons are one or two. But all master volumes have one or two cons. Many have more. So I do the Larmar, and if you search for master volume on my channel, you'll find it, or search for Super Reverb, or just go to the Vintage Fenders playlist. You'll find it pretty easily. That's the way to do it, and it's a post-phase inverter master volume. And thank you very much for the compliments. Hey, 1217 Productions, I'm not trying to shit on you. If you already have a Bassman 10, you got it basically free. Do whatever you want to with it. But when I say these things, I don't want people with a Super 10 out there to think, oh, I can turn this into a high watt. You can't. Oh, I can turn this into a 5150. You can't. You can give it a little more of this, a little more of that, but it's still pretty much what it is. But if you have one that looks terrible, that you don't have any money in, you can do whatever you want. Just know that it may or may not work. So, on a lot of higher gain amps, the neural DSP stuff, the fractal stuff, actually sounds better because it doesn't have the inherent noise floor of the thing that it's modeling, or it doesn't have to have the inherent noise floor. And in the context in which they're usually used on record, they can be indistinguishable. That's not a very popular opinion for me to voice as an amp person. But for certain styles of music, sometimes the neural and fractal and all that stuff actually is more useful for that genre than the tube or real version of that. Now, I don't think that the Deluxe Reverb or Twin Reverb or Super Reverb or AC30 or AC15 or Super Lead or 1987 have really been like in modeling. But when you get to the gain levels that you get with like a class 2C, like a 2C plus or whatever, that and beyond, you might be better off not having the inherent zzz of a Mesa. And here's Wes, Wes's name is on the screen right in front of me. There's Richard, who loves his Bassman 10 as a pedal platform. Like I said at the beginning, to me, it's not a very inspiring amp. It's very vanilla. But if you are a pedals guy, it could be your ideal choice. So there. Thank you for disagreeing with me and proving me right at the same time, Richard. I knew I liked having you around for all that. I debate myself so hard. Let's see. Sorry for those of you without YouTube Premium. You do get ads during the break, but you get one ad when you first come in. It's usually a skip 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you get an ad twice, once during each 7-minute intermission. I need to make some money out of this, but I don't want to give you ads every 2 minutes. Man, if you saw all the time YouTube's flashing, now would be a great time to insert ads. I'm like, no, it's really not. Shh. I don't give you anywhere near the number of ads the other channels do, nor as many as YouTube tells you I could or should. But it's nice to make a little bit of money off this. Let's see. Hey, TB, I answered a question the first hour about bad cats. Covered it pretty thoroughly there. Hey, Noslin 954, I have a Nikon F4 35mm camera. Is it worth keeping or going all digital? Wrong question. I used to have an Olympus OM3 from 1983, which is today a very rare and very valuable camera. My sister borrowed it and someone stole it from her, or she lost it or whatever. If I still had it, as I could afford film, I would still use it, but I would use it in addition to my digital stuff because I don't think they're comparable. I mean, if you have an old F4 and you have good lenses for it and you can afford film, it's a great option. Digital is also a great option, but I don't think that they're really interchangeable at this point. I think you learn faster. You certainly learn a lot more with digital because you can not only you can see the shot within seconds of taking it, or at least you can wait to get home and then see all your shots at once versus going to a lab and having a contact sheet made or waiting for prints and all that. So you can progress so much faster with digital and you can practice so much more. You know, it's free to practice with digital, whereas mistakes are costly with film. But when you get to a point where you're consistently getting the shot and composition that you want, and if it's something that you think is really worth it, say your child's graduation or some special event, or you're traveling or you have a unique opportunity, whatever, film is fantastic still. But film is really expensive. And so I'm not going to be buying a film camera because that would be an additional thing for me to spend money on that I don't have. But I think you should keep the F4 35 and maybe get a mirrorless DSLR as well. And if you have not used your Nikon in a long time, might want to practice with a similar style and layout functionally DSLR, and then go back once you get your skill level up again, revisit the F4. The F4 is fantastic. Reading the sausage comments. Trying to get, we're at the next break, obviously. I'm trying to catch up to the next round of questions. Is there a limit to speaker cable runs from a Duncan Power Stage pedal to an on-stage cab? Regularly playing big stages and have no idea what I'm doing. Well, David Thomas, I have no idea what you're doing either because I don't know what a Duncan Power Stage cable is. If it's a speaker run, if it's doing speaker level out, you should be fine with like 100 feet or so. I would contact Duncan. It might be in the owner's manual, gasp shock, but speaker runs can be pretty long. Mic level, balanced levels can be really long. Speaker levels can be pretty damn long depending on the quality of the cable, the environment through which it's passing, the diameter of the cable. If you go too long, you'll lose power, or it can generate heat. But 100 feet should be pretty doable. But confirm that with Duncan and the specs, because I'm not familiar with that device. Sorry. Studio One is a 2-channel 112BH7 output tube. Well, I still don't know the circuit, so I can't tell you how to fix the effects loop implementation. If I had it here, we could figure it out, but I don't have the answer for you. Sorry. But it may just be a matter of you just need to experiment where you connect the ground. Hey, Jordan Johnson, if you have an amp with no effects loop but 4 inputs, could you go in one channel out to time-based effects and back in the other channel to get less distortion in them as a workaround? I'm trying to figure out. If you had dual inputs, like a high and low gain input on each channel, so you plug into the high gain and then run from the low gain out to effects, time-based effects like reverb, delay, and then run the wet out of that into the other channels, you could. Probably going to have ground loop issues. Could easily be introducing a lot of noise doing that. And I'm not sure what benefit you get over just going into your wet pedal and keep saying, all right, let's do 30% wet and sending off just one input. And control, it'd also be more convenient to control the level of the effect from the pedal for most of the time. What you're describing would work, but I don't know that it'd be an optimal or desirable way to do it. I have no experience of vintage 47 amps. Sorry, Chenga. I've heard various things about them, but I've not tried one. Please kick my butt for ever selling my 82 2203. Well, Scott, if we meet each other, I will kick the fuck out of your ass for that. And you kick mine because I traded a 65 Deluxe Reverb for a JC 120. In my defense, I was 17 at the time, but still. So we'll just kick each other's butts. Only the best takes make lentils jokes. Thank you, Wes. That means a lot coming from you. I wish I still had my Olympus OM3. It's a great little SLR. But my sister, once again, she always found a way to make things worse. She died in 2019, so I'm not speaking ill of the dead. I spoke ill about her when she was around and right in front of me. We didn't get along for the most part, mostly because the things she did like that all the damn time. What Indian food should you get for dinner? Eliminator asked. Well, I think you should get something involving dal, given the lentil question. And I do like panak paneer to go along with it. And then I like as spicy a curry as possible. I'm not a huge fan of lamb because last time I had lamb, it tasted like rancid sweater, and I can't always have that association now. And I'm not a huge fan of chicken unless it's chicken tikka, the chicken tikka. But again, really hot. But now I'm hungrier. I'm hungrier than ever. Fuck. I'm going to a book club tonight, so I've got a potluck thing. I have no idea what I'm going to eat. Hopefully there'll be something good. But now I want like vindaloo, and there won't be any of that. So, maybe I'll go get some Indian tomorrow. Is Two Rock and Bartell the best hand-wired amps? Well, I think Bartell is the best, is the is the most gloriously built amp. I'd say that the Bartells, you cannot build anything more beautifully. I do think it's well beyond the point of diminishing returns. It is beauty for its own sake. It is perfection for its own sake. I don't think it functionally needs to be as good as it is. I think you could have done things a little less this, a little less that, and still had the same results. But I like that such a thing exists. And the Benson amps are really good. I don't think Two Rock is necessarily top 5, but they're definitely top 10. I think Two Rocks make a fine amp, but I don't. Of the ones that I've seen, they seem good, very, very good, but not like, oh my gosh, look at that. Bartells are certainly the most flabbergasting. But as far as the best hand-wired amps, I'm still going to give it to 50s and 60s Fenders because they invented and perfected the game. John Hogg, thank you for getting my legume reference. Let's see. Crank amps. Oh God, don't get me started. Those things are such bullshit. All right, we are reaching the end. I have not done my homework, Wallpaper Music. I almost never read the book for the book club because it's all. I always get outvoted. It's always something like The Goldfinch that I will never ever have any interest in reading. But I really like the people and the conversations and the food, and they talk about books I don't care about. I wander off and have a glass of wine and a think. It's fine. We're reaching the end. I'm gonna try to zip through some questions. Make sure I've not missed any super chats. My question about the difference between Deluxe Reverb amp and Fender's other larger amps like Pro, Super, or Twin, they're all the same circuit. The Deluxe is actually, they're not based off the Deluxe. The Deluxe is not based off them. Fender had a blueprint for a new amp that was going to be done with 2 channels, with reverb and tremolo on 1 channel, and they're all variants on that. The larger ones would have bright switches. The larger ones would have mids pots. The Deluxe would not have those things, but it's the same kind idea with different transformers, numbers of speakers, and wattages. But they are all 99% the same circuit, which is beautiful for players because if you know how to use the Deluxe Reverb, you know how to use the Twin Reverb. And they're a genius thing from Fender because he only had to design 1 preamp board and he only had to train his factory workers to build 1 amp, and they could build 10 different amp models out of knowing how to build 1 amp. It's great. Let's see. Super chat. Again, thank you. Do the AC30s need any mod off the shelf? I'd like to, get one that's great out of the box. If so, maybe I'll wait for the Freeman version. They don't need any. There are mods that I think give it even more reliability and give it more tonal flexibility. But the stock AC30 Custom and AC15 Custom, the Custom, not the Custom Classic, but the C2X, and C1 and C1X, those are fantastic amps off the shelf. I would buy one and gig with it tomorrow. The one thing you need to know is that most of the Custom series come with not great tubes that have been shipped for 3,000 miles before you get a chance to play them. The amp usually sounds a lot better with a fresh set of tubes, and a whole set of JJs for one of those is going to be like $150 and really will up the sound that you'll get from that. And while the Blues sounds better than the Greenback sounds really good, and there's quite a serious price difference. So don't be afraid to get one with the Greenback if opportunity and money point you that way. Any silicone type to use for Fender Doghouse caps? Yeah, it's if you're in the States, this Permatex It's often sold at automotive places like AutoZone. It's an RTV silicone. RTV, it's non-reactive. It says silicone RTV right there. Clear adhesive sealant. You can use one of the red ones, one of the black ones. I use the clear. Sometimes it's sold as aquarium silicone, or as an aquarium sealant, but usually you can get it at AutoZone or Pet Boys or any other automotive store. If you're in a different part of the world, I don't know what your option is, but RTV silicone is the way to go. Let's see, make sure I've not missed any other big questions before we wrap this up. I'm going to have to go back and read some of the comments you guys making to each other at the end. Hey, Lucas, friend is bringing his AC30CC for work. We'll do a general service beyond diagnosing and repairing the actual faults. Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of videos on the Custom Classic. Look at all the Custom Classics. Not just the 3030K. The main issue of the Custom Classics is the effects loop was made. They messed up. I think it's C19 or C18. The capacitor right before the effects loop send in the stock amp is if you have two little white or two little red box caps by the effects loop jacks, C19 and C18. They're probably both 0.22. The one that's connected to the output of the volume of the send should have been 2.2 microfarad, not 0.22 microfarad. And that's the main thing to fix on those. And R6 and R7 are 100K plate resistors in stock form. Change those to the proper 220K when you get a chance. I've got a whole bunch of videos covering all that on the Custom Classics. So look for that because we're running out of time for today. I've got to do some errands before we go to be book club people. I don't like a doner kebab, which is basically a bland gyro. I've tried them. I don't care for them. What are the ways that limit solid state amps from behaving? Sound like tube amps? Man, Jordan, that is too big a question for right now. Solid state can sound really great. Just usually solid state is reserved for the more budget end of things, and tube is reserved for the more high-end things. So people tend not to throw too much money at their solid state design. But like Scott said, there's some good sounding PVs out there, and it doesn't have to be something crazy like a Pierce amp from 1986 or anything. There was some real nice high-end solid state stuff out there, and Lifeson got some interesting sounds out of some GKs at the time. What is a bandmaster? See, a lot of them never bothered looking at them. A bandmaster is a non-reverb pro, basically. It's like a smaller version of a twin reverb without reverb. Well, I'm glad you like your JC120. I hope you still like it when you've tried some other amps, though. JC120 was great in 1978. Doesn't hold up in comparison to the competition. I used to love Lamb, but once you get a Lamb that's got all that lanolin and it was just a little too old and a little too rancid sheep. It's every time I smell Lamb, I get that taste again in my mouth, and it does not make me happy. And I know that huge percentages of the world eat lamb and mutton and goat, and they're happy with it. And I'd have goat again before I'd have lamb again. Deadeye cold cuts, I don't have time to get into that. Same for Tall Tim, sorry. The questions asked at the beginning always get answered. And super chats it's like a nature of a contract I need to answer. I have not worked on any Bandlander rectos. I've certainly done my time with old dual and triple and single rectifiers, and they're all horrible rip-offs of SLOs where they get everything wrong, and they outsell the good thing that they're copying, which drives me nuts. Anyway. Let's see, push this button. So just a nice little reminder to everyone else. And yeah, like Wallpaper Music said, there's some interesting GKs from the 70s solid state stuff. And some of the Music Man stuff is great. Solid state is tricky to make behave like tube, but people have done it to varying degrees of success. the Valve State amps that Marshall had, you can get some interesting sounds out of. I don't think I want to trade 68 Plexi for one, but you can make music with all these devices. Anyway, go find a box that lets you make music and go make music. I'll see you guys next time.